And three. Well, hey, first of all, Houston Vineyard, we haven't had a COVID conversation in a while, and so I'm excited to do this. And I'm going to tell you why we're going to have it, and then I'll introduce you to these lovely people that you see on the screen with me. The vineyard, we're part of the vineyard, and the global vineyard loves to church plant. It's part of our main mission and value. And the Houston Vineyard is not an exception. We've planted numerous churches, the most recent being, I think, a year and a half ago. And as a result, we have a fund which we take from the general fund every month, and we deposit a little bit into a fund specifically for church planting. And that's why you guys are here. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But John Aureli, you are the lead pastor, or do we call you lead senior bishop? What do we call it?
All of those things.
All of those things at the Mission Vineyard in San Antonio. And why don't you introduce Derek for us, because you guys have a cool relationship.
Derek Blaylock is one of the most brilliant and creative, bright minds. Like, I want to hang out with Derek all the time because he is funny and fantastic. He's just bright, super, super bright. Now, that comes out in intelligence. Like, he's an amazing engineer at his, tent making gig in the oil fields and selling chemistry to different companies and all that. So I don't even know. It's too complicated for me to understand. You don't even know all about that, so you understand what Derek does. But he's an amazing dad and husband, caring and loving, with 4 beautiful kids, and just amazing. So it's just been a joy to get to know him, and from the outset has just had a fire in his belly for the Lord and for church planting. And so when they came to the church, it was like, gosh, what does it mean to steward this fire? And we got to journey together, which has been fantastic. And it just had been an answer to prayer for Mission Vineyard as we've gotten to journey together. And now, as he has been sent out, planting the Live Oak Vineyard with his wonderful wife, Amanda.
Yeah. So Derek, you guys, how long ago did you officially plant the Live Oak Vineyard?
July of 2018 was our official launch at the end of July. So about 2 years.
About 2 years. And so the reason we're talking today is because you're at sort of a crossroads in the life of Live Oak Vineyard and your own personal life. And so why don't you share a little bit about where you're at, the decisions you're making, and what that means, what the implications of that for Live Oak and for you guys as a family as well.
Yeah, so I, started out this journey by and to continue along that for a number of good reasons and one not so good reason that I'll talk about probably later. And so we were just committed to starting from the ground up, from scratch. We came to Live Oak, started a small group, started growing. Before COVID, I was cramming about 20 people into my house, including a number of kids, which was fun and wonderful, and also intimidating when people above that core group would come in. They're like, what is going on here? Or the other one's, you guys are called? No, we're just a house church right now because it used to be friends with him, and they offered up a meeting space nearby about 10 minutes from where we're at now that we could meet for a very reasonable. They have a heart for church planting here on the I-35 corridor. And so we had planned on starting to meet in that building, and our first meeting was supposed to be Easter of this year, but then COVID hit. And so we took everything online. But along with that growth, my job in the oil field, you've seen how this year you've heard have people in your church that work in industry. It's just been a roller coaster. It's crazy. I have 10 people that report to me, so I have a significant amount of managerial responsibility. In addition to, I'm like one of the few customer-facing managers as well, so I do a lot of customer interaction and work. And so I just need more bandwidth, to be frank, to support the growth. And then in COVID, it's been COVID, so all the grief and the lament and a lot of pastoral counseling and coaching that's increased during this time. I needed some additional time to spend and support the growth of the church and support the people that we're ministering to. So we talked to the board about it, and I went through faith walking. I went when I was in Miami, and that started my journey of feeling comfortable with fundraising at all. Because when I initially went in, I told the board, frankly, I don't have faith to raise funds and to be supported. I just don't. I'm not there yet. So I'll work, and we'll figure it out. And but through that faith walking process, God worked in me and assured me and helped me get to a place in a very loving and tender way of, I'll take care of your kids and I'll take care of your wife and your family. And so I was at a place in this last July, so call it 2 years. Like, okay, I think we can do this, right? And so we started fundraising, and now we're at 77% funded for what we were asking for. And so
Yeah, and what I love about this, because like John was great, and we got to hang out already, Derek, at I think it was in Miami actually, where I first met you a little bit, and hearing the vision you have for Live Oak Vineyard, but also your area and what that looks like. And I think what's really amazing about your story is that there was a commitment to the obedience of planting, but really from a perspective of and I'll do as much as I can to take the weight off the church so we can actually make this work. But you come to this point where God has been faithful. There's been influence building. There's people that are coming that need what God is doing through Live Oak, and so all of a sudden you're at this crossroads, like, okay, I can't keep doing full-time both, because that's the reality. Is you're not doing full-time oil field and part-time church. You're doing full-time both, and so you've got to sort of like create the margin. And so this is like a giant step of faith. First of all, like, I think we just take a moment and recognize huge step of faith, but it's also a very crucial moment in the life of Live Oak Church, because like the Live Oak Vineyard now is at a place where there is not only intentionality in why you're doing it, but there is intentionality in how you're going to do it. You are taking a step of faith, not only as a family, but as a church, to say God has called us into something to be a blessing to our neighborhood, to be a place of hope in times of trial and suffering that's happening all around us. And we trust you in it. And so the reason we're having this conversation is because Herschel Rosser, who John works with you in Mission Vineyard and who founded Church in the City, which became the Houston Vineyard after probably 27 name changes around the years. But he reached out to us and said, I love the Houston Vineyard, and I know you guys love church planning, and here's what's going on. And so as a church, we're looking at our church planning fund and saying, okay, this thing is growing and we don't have any church plants in the pipeline right now, and saying, but we want to be invested in kingdom stuff. And so as a church, and this is why we're doing this video, I want the whole Houston Vineyard to understand that we are collectively coming behind Live Oak Vineyard for the next year, and saying we believe in what God has called you to as a church. And Derek and your family, we believe in the call that God has placed in your life, and we want to be invested into the kingdom in you and in Live Oak Vineyard. And so that's why we're having the conversation, and I am super excited about it. But we also want to be good partners, not just in like, okay, here's some money, like we're going to do the financial investment, but we want to hear a little bit more about your heart and your vision and what you see God doing, so that we might know how to better pray for the year as well. Because you're taking a step of faith, and we want to get behind and support that and pray for you in the process. So share a little bit about, I know you even have like a good engineer, you probably even have some sort of graphic that you can pull up and show us, but share with us a little bit about the why behind and what's going on, and how we could maybe come together with you to pray.
Yeah, I want to do that, but I also want to share just really briefly, and we haven't had a chance to discuss this yet, but the legacy that your church has on my wife and I in particular. It's specifically your church is the reason I am in the vineyard right now. And here's how that happened. I used to work as a camp counselor at Carolina Creek Christian Camp outside of Huntsville. And every summer at that time that I was there, this would have been the early 2000s, the Vineyard churches in Houston would come for a week and essentially rent that camp out, right? And they brought all their own programming. And at the time, I was Baptist and was in that. So wonderful, glad for that. But they just didn't have the grid work of kingdom theology like we talk about in the Vineyard. And y'all did all your own programming, so I essentially got to hang out with all the Vineyard kids and listen to the preaching. And the youth minister from your church was preaching that week, and he preached on the kingdom of God and talked about kingdom theology. And it just like, I want to know more about this. It blew my mind in a very good way. And I made up in my mind and my heart that if I ever had a chance to get near a Vineyard church, I was going to go to it and check it out because I want to know more. 2 weeks after that, also, I started having a more, let's call it doing the stuff type experience where we had the inner city kids could come in from the wards, and this is a lot of tough situations. And I was in prayer for them one time, and I kind of ran out of words. I ran all the way up to the end of myself, and I received the gift of praying in tongues so that I could pray better. And that just was kind of the introduction. That couple weeks span that summer was the introduction for me for doing the stuff and for kingdom theology. So I started reading books and all that. When I finally got to San Antonio, many years later with work, I found Mission Vineyard, and here we are. So
that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, your church's legacy is why I'm in the Vineyard. That's when I was first exposed to the way we do church and life together. And I wanted that. Like, it was just when someone, one of my co-counselors at that time, he's now the national training director for Chi Alpha Ministries, the Assemblies of God campus ministries, and the missionaries and all those. And I talked to him from time to time, and I promise y'all, everybody knew there was something different about the Vineyard. Like, they would always talk about the Vineyard kids in the Vineyard week. Something's going on there. We still talk about it. So that's the legacy.
That's awesome.
You all have. So you've already supported me in that way. I'm grateful for it. And so what is my current heart for church planting? So very simply, our mission, if I can state it that way, is having a heart that we learned from Mission Vineyard and a way of being, is we want to help very busy people welcome Jesus into all of life. That's what I'm up for, what I want to do. Why we wanted to plant a church. And a lot of that just mirrors my own desperation to encounter God. And what that really, it came to a head to me just as I was moving to San Antonio. And I was 29. I was a sales manager at a big company in the Texas region under my belt. I worked 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. I was just busy, right? And I was still doing I'm still trying to connect with Christ. I gave what I can. I participated in small groups, but I would do the quiet time thing, right? In the morning, I get up and I read my Bible and pray. And then, like, all my connection with Jesus is gone by 9 a.m. because of just the craziness, right? And for me, it began as a place of just desperation of wanting more of Jesus and more of a connection with God throughout all my day. And I knew there had to be a way to do that because the church has talked about it for a long time. And for me, what that looked like was just, I set my alarm 3 times for just initially 3 times a day. And when it would go off, no matter what I was doing, unless I was in the middle of a sales pitch or something, I would stop what I was doing and pray, drop everything for 3 minutes maximum. A lot of times, maybe 5 minutes, I would just stop and pray. That was the beginning of the change of connection in my life that led to God convicting us to sell our house. We had a big house on the golf course kind of deal and had lots of toys, and to begin giving our stuff away and to remember the poor and not be so focused on my own thing. And then out of that came the conviction of church planting. Again, And so our desire is realizing that we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's 5 million worries that everybody has to carry. They were doing that before the pandemic, and now it's, exponential. Is in the midst of all that, how do we help people encounter Christ every moment of every day, to be recalled back to the love of God, to live in a rhythm and a simplicity that allows space in your life to get to know your neighbor's name to start with, and then to serve them in some practical way, and ultimately, hopefully, end up leading us to be peacemakers in our community as we're heading into election season. That is just in my mind, is it burns brighter than anything, that the church, we have something more to offer than this contentiousness. So that's what we're aiming towards. You want to see the church planning plan? You want me to show that, or is that...
Yeah, I want to see that, and then I got some questions for you too, John. Don't get comfortable. But yeah, so let's see. Because I love this, because it is so simple, but there is something really almost elegant about the simplicity of it. So pop it up on the screen and walk us through your church planning master plan.
Sure. So yeah, when I was going through Residency Plus, they asked us to put together a 2-year plan for church planning. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months. I don't know. I've never planted a church before. I just work here, But I was sitting in my office one day at the end of the workday, and I lived, or not lived, but I worked in downtown San Antonio, right by the airport, and our conference room looked out over where the takeoff runway is for the airport. So I'm sitting there contemplating this. I have to go tonight. That very night, I was supposed to go and kind of give a pitch to my small group about what we were doing, and I was looking at this plane takeoff and just kind of communing with God. And this is what he gave me. He's like, Derek, what I want you to do in this church plan is this. Out. And each one is self, builds on itself. It builds this virtuous cycle of communion with Christ. So we start with just developing a rule of life, or some people call that a rhythm or a discipline, or just a way of doing life that's more than just 15 minutes in the morning when I have my quiet time, and maybe 10 minutes before I go to bed, if I don't just pass out from exhaustion, right? Is developing a rhythm and a way of life. Like I talked about with me, that was setting alarms on my phone, which led to other practices in my life of praying at daily offices, of doing an evening exam, and of some lecto divina, kind of thing. Once you have those practices, you can start those in your life. God led me and my wife into a place of simplifying our life. Like I told you, get rid of your toys, stop overworking to pay for stuff you don't need to impress people you don't even know, right? And build space into your life, build downtime, build margin to know the people around you as a start with, right? That leads us into a place of service once we have time in our life to actually do that. And then from there, a practice of continual looking for opportunities to do good and to serve in your thing, and then looking at what it means to be a peacemaker, right? And what we feel like those things engender in us is the second role. This is kind of like this is what happens in your life when you develop a rule of life, right? You're able to worship God in spirit and truth in a much more deeper way. When you have simplicity in your life, you're able to have authentic connection with your church and with your neighbors and your family. When your service, that's where some really good evangelism comes from, right? And then peacemaking is, you have to start there to engage the formal community at large. Right? And then what we've noticed and seen, and I'm sure y'all would see this in your own life too, is, when you have a community that has authentic adoration of God and authentic connection, you have real fellowship, like what I think what the Bible talks about fellowship. Like even now, what's been the most fun thing for me in this fundraising process, I'm calling up and reconnecting with people I've had fellowship a decade ago, and maybe talk to just a couple times in, but we pick right back up. Right? It's like we're still just a love, a bond, a shared experiences there. That's a fruit of God that you can't get except you can't aim for it directly. It's just like a byproduct of all this. And so the same thing, authentic connection and evangelism leads to this radical hospitality, a place to come as you are, but you're not going to stay as you are. But there is that definitely come as you are, which is tough in this season, and where people are just at each other. It's hard to do that. And then we're looking for justice, right? The justice of Christ, the justice of the kingdom, the economy of God to be made manifest in our systems and in our community. So that's it. That's the plan. Everybody that comes and everybody that's willing to whatever way you're willing to engage, if you're willing to come in and dive deeper and get in a small group or maybe even go through our leadership cohort, we're going to develop these 4 practices in our life and move forward by the grace of God.
Awesome. I love it. I love the simplicity of where it ends with fellowship, hospitality, and justice. And I think it's so cool. Awesome. John, question. So this is a church plant for you. You guys are a church that is growing and finding roots in San Antonio, finding impact in your neighborhood. What does it mean for you to be a part of church planting, and specifically in the case here with Derek and their church?
Yeah, you can't you can't make everybody a church planter. Everybody's a church planter. The ironic thing is some people that aren't followers of Jesus today are called to be the next church planters. For our church, God's told us that we're going to be one of 18 churches that we multiply here in San Antonio. That's the vision that He's given for us. By 2035, we'll be 18 churches. We don't know what that looks like, but we can't make that up. And so, when Derek and Amanda came to the church planting was already on his heart. I think, Derek, you were first talking about Brazil and maybe what it meant to church plant in Brazil. And as God continued, we just fostered that. Like, okay, let's co-discern. What does that look like? And then the Lord seemed to share with Derek and so awesome moving to Live Oak. To every single person for a unique place. And to steward that meant facilitating what we had as a cohort of potential church planters in that Residency Plus that Derek talked about, and allowing that season of discernment to be a process that Derek and Amanda could go through in looking at planning and what it looks like for them to plant a church. Now, I have to tell you, we've done that residency 2 times since Derek and Amanda have planted, and no church planters have come. Yeah. People have gone through it, but it hasn't meant church planting for them. So we, as a church, have received the vision from God that this is what He's going to do. We are open-handed to facilitating that in whatever practical ways we can. But at the end of the day, this is a God thing done by God's power, in God's influence, in God's strength. And for a church planter, what that's meant, I think, is in watching Derek and Amanda, is a ton of grit and faithfulness in going in the same direction faithfully. And it's been an honor, I think, just to walk alongside and watch God do that. Sometimes the small group doesn't turn out the way you think it should look. It's not a bunch of like happy people ready to launch and let's go for the kingdom. It's people like with normal problems. And so, like,
and sometimes abnormal ones.
Seriously. And so we understand that, like, as Jesus discipled the 12, it wasn't that they were go-getters ready to take on the world. It was normal people that Jesus just asked to be faithful day by day. And so I love watching Derek and Amanda take that and make that real within their vision and mission. Like, we're all just going to be super real, and we're going to look at Jesus day by day and believe that in that faithfulness, He's going to multiply what He's doing in our lives for the sake of the kingdom of God in Live Oak. And so as a church, that it's not like we're raising up church planters. We're being faithful and walking alongside the vision, mission, and power of the Holy Spirit in other people's lives, like Derek and Amanda, as God calls them forth into faithfulness, and just encouraging them to lean into that grit, because it's that grit and faithfulness that authentically creates a discipleship that multiplies. And that's what's happening in Live Oak, and I just love watching it. It's been an honor
Yeah.
to be part of it.
And I mean, Derek and John, we're excited to be a part of this. I think especially in the conditions we find the world in COVID and political unrest and like everything that's going around. And I'm talking about the United States. And then we look beyond the US, if we had any eyes to see what's going on beyond us, I mean, there is so much pain and hurt and loss and insecurity. And it is a moment where hope is hard to find. And quite frankly, it has turned us all inward, and not in a way of reflection, but in the way of panic in some ways. And so as a churches, I think, as we see, Derek, you guys are taking this giant step, and it's in the middle of COVID, but as churches, if we can come together and sort of say, this is the work of the kingdom is important, and it's important for us to invest in, and it's important for us to be a part of. I think it reorients our hearts even to see the world differently. And so like taking the risk in the middle of pandemic, and John, for you guys, I know in saying, okay, this is a time where it would be so great to have more people around, more good leaders, more everything, and saying, no, like this is not about us preserving what we have. It is about us advancing the kingdom, and that takes risk. And these are risks that are worth taking, but it also is not risks that we take alone. And so what I love, and I'm really grateful that you guys, that Herschel reached out and that we're able to partner together, us, Mission Vineyard, a bunch of other people, and that are investing in, Derek, what God is doing in Live Oak Vineyard, but also we're investing in the person that God has called, the people that God has called to lead it, in you guys. And so I just want to say, on behalf of the Houston Vineyard, we're really excited and honored that we get to walk with you guys for this season and to see what happens. It is an investment of great importance for the kingdom of God. And I think it's an investment in incredibly fertile soil and with a great gardener. And so we're stoked. And I wanted to do this. I wanted to hear a little bit of your story, John. I wanted to hear some of your heart of how how Live Oak Vineyard comes out of Mission Vineyard. And also just to tell the church that we get to be excited about being a part of this. We're committed for the next year, and we continue to walk out relationship, continue to see what God will do. And so we are anticipating, as you guys take risks and as we cheer you on and pray for you from Houston, we are anticipating hearing the God stories come out of the risks that you take, because we know they'll happen. And I also know, like John, the fruitfulness of this, like you guys have a very big vision for San Antonio, but it's one that is, if you could plan for it, it wouldn't be as scary. And so I think just we honor the risk that you're taking as well, to dream bigger than you can plan for, and to trust God that he will provide the path at the moment that you need to take it. And so I just want to say that, Derek, this is awesome. We're praying for you guys. If there's any way that people want to get in touch with you, and if like you have a newsletter, if they want to get a hold of you, where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so lovechurch.org, lovechurch.org. You can start there. They can reach out and get connected with me over email. We do have a newsletter. And then I am in the process of raising up prayer partners in addition to financial, and I facilitate that through an app called GroupMe. And I send out prayer requests 2 or 3 times a week to a core group. So if they have any interest in doing that, we can help them get that set up and connected as well. And if you make it over to San Antonio, want to come spend the night, see the river walk, always feel free to give us a holler. We'd love to meet with anybody that comes over, and maybe you can join us for some worship and some Bible study at some point.
Yeah. And John, if people want to reach out to you, because you not only pastor the mission, but you are involved in Multiply Vineyard, you are some sort of regional guru. I think that's the official title. How could people reach out and get in touch with you as well? Oh no, you got to unmute. There you go.
If we didn't do that once during this call, I don't know if it would be a true Zoom call. John at missionvineyard.org is an easy way. John at missionvineyard.org. Happy to show people how the vineyard offers resources to folks who are interested in planting or supporting church planting.
Awesome. All right. Hey, love you guys. Have a great Tuesday.
Thank you for your love and support.
Thanks, guys. Ending the recording.